Brian.
Everything's on.
Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's Farmington School Board meeting. If you'd all join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next on our agenda, we have public participation. I don't know if we have anybody here for any public participation, or if we have somebody online.
No one online.
No one's online?
No one speaking online.
I've got two, Charlie, that I'd like to bring up once the public has had their chance.
Okay. Well, go ahead, Tim.
Just want to give two quick shout-outs. Since the last meeting, the Tuesday after the last meeting, I had the honor of attending the National Honor Society induction ceremony. And I want to say the administrative staff and the staff that were there did an outstanding job. They really made the district proud. Later on in the week, I had the opportunity to attend the job fair here at the high school. And again, kudos to everybody that was involved in the planning and setup of that function. It was phenomenal. It was a great venture for the kids. Very well done. And again, everybody that was involved did the district proud, and thank you.
Yeah, I would agree. Thank
Well
you.
said.
Moving on to meeting minutes. We have meeting minutes of May 3rd, public and non-public sections 1 through 6.
I'll make a motion that we approve the public minutes of May 3rd, 2021, along with non-public session 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
I'll second for discussion. Go ahead, Rathel.
And one of those, I need to go back and look, I think it was tabled last week as far as
Because of the seal.
sealing. So
But that's not part of this motion.
let me double check, I believe.
It'll be a second motion.
Okay.
I think it has to be
So
second.
discussion on this motion. Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Before we get to the next order of just business, Joel's may not be able to be with us. He's taking care of some personal items, but may be able to call in later in the meeting. But go ahead, Tim. Yeah, what was those meeting minutes?
It was 4.
So I'll make a motion to seal the May 3rd, 2021 non-public session 4, and it's 91A, 3, A, B, and C.
Yes, and I would
Second.
say 3 years.
Sure.
You acceptable with that, 3 years?
I'm more than happy.
Any discussion? Not hearing any, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Old business.
Good, too.
Go ahead.
First one is Budget Committee. This Wednesday, they're scheduled to meet. Unfortunately, I've got a funeral scheduled with a family gathering that particular night. Mary is the alternative, and I'm not in a position to ask her to attend in my absence, so I'd spoken to Josh earlier today, who was willing to stand in, but in order for him to do that, we'd have to appoint him as an alternate to the Budget
Alternate to
Committee.
the alternate.
Yeah.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Not hearing any, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
I have one more under old business.
Go ahead.
So going through the confidential folder tonight, I saw your spreadsheets on merit increases. And I think one thing that this board hasn't done, and I want to talk about it non-public versus public, is during last year's budget process, this was a new mentality that the board brought forward. We've never done it before, and I think we as a board have to have the discussion of what is merit increases, what is the criteria that's going to be set, and we need a policy in place on how we're going to, or at least my opinion is we need a policy on how we're going to award these so that it's fair across the board. And who's going to be responsible for what. For instance, I know you're probably bringing the full list, but what involvement did the elementary principal have? What involvement did our middle school? What involved collaboration with the high school principal for the non-union people that are kind of in the trenches below you?
There's some other pieces that I'll need to discuss.
That's fine, and we can do that in non-public,
Yeah.
but my concern is, you know, we looked at this, we said, hey, you know, the town does this program, but we really didn't set any conditions on policies on how. And I think that needs to be done, or we're going to walk into a mess that I don't think we want to walk into.
And certainly, I don't disagree with you. I think one of the things that I'm looking at, particularly for the non-administrative positions, is to establish a wage scale as well, which is part of what there's a proposal there for, and part of that discussion. So,
And I'm not,
in the absence of having that specific guidance, and that was something that was suggested as a need. So that's where I've gone with
So
part of
based
that.
upon the information that you provided us, what were your thoughts on what you felt we could resolve tonight or make progress on?
Looking at two things, I have two separate proposals really for those groups that are not administrative. One is a wage scale that I'm looking not for this coming year, but for '23, which would then be a budgetary issue, and knowing full well that we've already budgeted, so that ship has sailed. But then looking to see whether we do things as a merit increase, or we look at how do we start to approach that wage scale to start to bridge the gap and get there. And I think that's two philosophical discussions where we need to go. And happy to do either, but I can't really discuss any of it without getting into individuals, which this isn't the venue for.
and we can do that in non-public, but here's kind of some of the things in my mind is, a merit increase is strictly that. It's for the employee who doesn't just meet their expectations, they exceed it, and they exceed it on a regular basis. My other concept is, because what we're doing is we're giving everybody, let's call it a cost of living raise, which is the 2 or 2.5% that was in the budget. Then we're giving an extra on top of that. So that extra, in my mind, has to be tied to an evaluation process. The second question is with the extra, is this something that we give a raise and it goes into their hourly wage? Or is this something that at the end of the fiscal year, we might write a check for $4,000 as a bonus for that particular year, hoping that the following year, we're going to get the same work productivity, and potentially they get another $4,000 for that productivity. You know, none of that's been discussed at the board level, and I think we need to have that deeper discussion or fast track it through the policy committee to get it back with some concepts of, in communication with you and your executive staff and whatever on where we want to go with it. But this is one of those things that if we're going to continue it, we've got one opportunity to get it right, because it's going to be looked at with some of the numbers, and that's my only concern. And as you bring, say, Charlie King's an employee to us for a merit increase, I kind of want something in black and white that if the taxpayer calls me up and says, hey, on top of the 2.5%, Charlie King got a $4,000 raise, what's up with that? And without getting into the personnel, but we can defend it. We have a policy, we have a process, we have an evaluation, and that's why he got that raise.
Yeah, that makes sense. One of the things that we need to look at too, though, is that everyone's employment agreements end June 30. And so I also need to be able to tell people where they're going to be, and we're getting close on time. So I want to make sure too that we are I mean, if it's going to be a down the road, or if it's going to, I need to be able to let them know soon.
I agree with you, and I think this is, maybe it's something that we can hash out in non-public tonight. If we can't, maybe we kick it back to policy committee. But my concern is, perception-wise, we have to make sure that this is fair and not political.
Granted.
And we've got a lot of deserving employees, and I want to make sure it's done right.
That makes sense.
I'm done.
Okay. New business. School year 21,
I have
22.
an old,
Oh, go ahead.
before we go there. One of the pieces of old business that had come up briefly for hiring new administrators, we have an assistant principal that we are looking to hire for for Valley View, excuse me. And looking at that procedure, our policy speaks to the hiring of principals. It does not speak directly to the hiring of assistant principals. And you had said pretty much as a board, just, go find somebody, we trust you. And I appreciate that. But I want to make sure that as we're looking at the next steps, what number of candidates are you looking to interview, or do you just want me to bring forward a nomination and have you meet with that person? Because we're pretty close to that point, and I want to make sure that we aren't.
Well, let me ask you a few numbers. How many
Sure.
people applied?
I believe there were 5 or 6.
And how was that narrowed down to how many?
Well, we have them ranked. There's a front runner. There's a couple. I mean, I could do 1, I could do 2, I could do 3. I'm hoping that you're not going to want to spend several evenings and talk to them all.
Well, what I've done in the past, I would say, what works for me is I would like to see all the resumes. I would like to see how you guys total poll them, as far as where you feel the strongest candidates are. And then typically, if I had questions at that point saying, okay, I read the resumes, why isn't this person in the top 3? There'll be some discussion because you
Okay.
may have other stuff that doesn't show on
So
the resume.
essentially, a paper review to start with, and then we'll.
And then say, okay, we then, as a board, the board could say, yeah, we agree with what your summary, or we think we want to add this person, or we have questions about this person. And then whether that is, group discussion, depending on the candidates, it may be 1 or 2 people, because that's really what you have for the cream of the crop, or it could be more depth than that. So it's really
Okay,
depending on.
because again, we're looking at timing.
Right.
We're getting
Right.
pretty close to, gotta hurry up on this, so.
But really, you have, this is the pool, this is where we feel they are, and then there's an opportunity for the board to have discussion, and then from that, I guess we'll roll to the next step of who's getting in when we're doing it. That's,
Can I,
Okay,
whether that be,
because your next meeting is 2 weeks from now too, so
right.
I'm,
I mean, you just asked me, that's how I've done it in the past, which I think works for me, but go ahead, Tim.
just so I understand the process, these are 5 internal candidates, correct?
these are not internal candidates, no.
Okay. Do we have any internal candidates out of those 5?
I do not believe so.
Okay. All right, never mind.
What were your thoughts on what you were thinking would work with a timetable and the candidates?
Kind of hoping too, and maybe not at a regular meeting, if you were going to look at it that way, but either way, or send them to you for internal review on paper, and then we can see what we need to go from there.
Is the recommendation that you're going to bring forward the same recommendation that Blake was involved in?
Yes.
One thought is to, if we were going to have any interviews, I mean, typically, could we schedule those to be prior to our regular meeting at a certain, with a certain time, whether it's 30 or 45 minutes per candidate, and
We could do that.
it's up to the board, but,
Yeah, we could do that, and I would say.
or start a little bit late,
and-
start at 7, have a
yeah,
couple
and
interviews
Blake would-
before that.
Would be present for that as well.
Yeah.
We can do a review with the documents in the next couple of days. I think that's the first step we have to get out of the way.
Yeah, if you can put them up in a sense of
We
docs
can-
folders
we
to
can look and
candidates
see that.
and say, especially if you have that list of who you feel is the top ranked also, then somebody could say, at least ask a question, what about this candidate, what about that? You know, because,
I think probably best for me to put them up first without ranking for you to look at, and then we
That's
can have that discussion. Okay.
Is this something, we've got a meeting posted for tomorrow night, is this something potentially if they get up in the,
Actually, it is, we do not have a meeting posted for tomorrow night.
so that had been canceled.
Yes.
okay.
Otherwise, that would have been a really good idea.
Was the meeting
It wasn't
It w-
posted because we knew.
resolved it? Okay.
Yeah.
Can we get a posting out for 7 o'clock? Or can we do a workshop tomorrow? We still have to, we still have to post a
We
workshop.
still have to post it. I mean, if I put it up now, it's technically 24 hours ahead.
What is it, that's, unless someone's got a different night. But Wednesday is a budget. Josh is busy. You're out.
Yeah, I can do Thursday or Friday if that, and it doesn't have to, it doesn't, I mean, for my Thursday and Friday, it doesn't necessarily, I know it does for you, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a nighttime meeting.
I'm open.
So when were you needing a decision by?
Well, if we're not worried about tomorrow, you've got at least the rest of the meeting to thank Charlie.
Okay, so we'll pick that back up.
Okay, I will make a note of that.
But as far as the making a decision, as far as who to make an offer to, by next week or the week after that?
I would love to see if we could get something rolling by next week.
So potential interviews, if there is one, by next week.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I can do Thursday as far as discussion, but I don't think we would be having any interviews, right?
I would be looking at interviews probably the first of next week, like Tuesday
Okay.
or so, yeah. Because we would need time to let people know that as well. But I just don't
Yeah,
wanna
you know, the
necessarily
one
wait
thing
for-
well, we can talk about it a little bit later, but it may be easiest for, if that information is put up, if the board has a consensus that agrees with yours, it's not really necessary to have a meeting.
Well, there is that. But-
So-
Okay,
But
well,
we can't make that consensus without a meeting.
yeah, you need to have a meeting. You need to have a meeting to confirm. Because I would need to nominate and you would need to accept.
No, but that would be, say if we were going to go, say, at an interview process for next Monday.
Tuesday.
You still need to have a, we'll go through it later, yeah.
Okay, moving on to new business, school lunch pricing.
This is normally the time of year we actually discuss food pricing, but because it's all based upon last October's lunch numbers, it's what the price equity tool is actually based upon, what the state gives us, DOE gives us. And since there are no paid meals this year, we can't use it. So the state's actually put us out on our own to discuss the school lunch program. I know last year we didn't raise any prices, but the prices will be going up, just based upon the economy and everything else that's going on. The cost of food's gone up, the cost of labor's gone up, and surveying the local schools, districts that are around us, I think we at least need to be ready because there is no guarantee that the free lunches will last all year. If they run out of funds, they can shut it off at any time, and at least I'd like to be ready when they do.
Right, so our current lunch pricing, yeah, I mean, you got a spreadsheet with some supporting information.
Yeah.
So your spreadsheet, what was our current lunch cost?
$2.85.
Okay, so in your proposed price list, it goes to $3 across the board for lunch.
Right.
Looking at
Can
it.
we raise more than 10 cents at
Yeah.
a time? Okay.
And my one question was regarding the breakfast, actually. I agreed with your recommendations on the lunch. Why would we have a difference between the elementary school and the middle school? One being $1.50, the other one being $1.75.
Because what you get for a meal at the upper grades are bigger than what you get at the elementary school.
It's the portion size.
Yeah, portion size is smaller.
And did we have that difference in the pricing before?
I think it was the same across the board.
I think it's pretty across the
Yeah.
board.
Okay. Questions or comments on the board?
What's the percentage increase? Get the math,
5%? Yes. Yes. Couple more. Brian's our number guy. What is it, Brian?
but about 5%.
So Brian, what does this do with the,
Lunch is 5%.
Lunch is 5%? That's close.
if I remember last year's board, when they set the school lunch, we were operating in a deficit. What does this do per the district cost? In other words, for the elementary school type A lunch, full price is $3. What is our cost for that meal?
Well, right now, what the state is reimbursing actually covers the expense.
Okay.
My concern is if
That
it ends, I don't want to be at a deficit from what we normally would charge.
But
Right now, we actually
what
get
Tim was saying, we were in a deficit before, I think, $40,000.
Our contract has us at a deficit to start with. Our contract basically says they assume this much and figuring we're going to cover between $35,000 and $40,000 a year of this much. And if we actually end up having sales that exceed that, then it will eat that down.
The last meeting we had with our vendor, it's actually, we've made up a lot of ground in the last 2 months just because we have more kids in school. And so we've been able to have more meals. We get more meals we serve,
reimbursed
the more
for.
we get reimbursed for. So that's kind of been a saving grace.
You start to hit an economy of scale.
And the $4 adult price, is that the break-even price?
Pretty much. I mean, they get bigger portions, I guess. Well, I don't know how big the portions are. You eat more. So, maybe not big enough for me, but.
Well, and I usually do the a la carte. I'll just go in and get a piece of pizza. I don't usually get the full meal, so I'm not a good judge of that piece either.
Is that-
Pizza's much improved, but
Has that changed from what we're doing prior to going into everybody? Is that different than what we're doing now? Because I don't think the free lunch covers
no,
our
it isn't.
employees.
It
No,
isn't.
free lunch-
So the $4 is...
The $4 is what it was.
That's right out of pocket,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve the 2021-2022 proposed price list for our cafeteria.
Second.
Second by Mary. Discussion?
I have one question. I do remember something about the not to exceed 10 cents. And
I
Actually, it's been raised up to 15 cents, the last I checked.
okay.
When I just
they've
paid
allowed
that
us to
last year.
a little bit more wiggle space.
Okay.
But this board has been very careful about making sure that our incremental changes are small to try to make sure that we're giving, when I say this board, the school board in
Yeah.
general, not this board.
Historically.
Historically,
Yeah.
the school board has tried to make sure that the changes aren't a lot all at once, and haven't always gone with the 10. Sometimes they've gone halfway with the 5.
Yeah.
And many years have held it. I think it's only gone up twice in the time that I've been here, so.
And a year from now, you may say, you know what, it works, that's a good price, we're not going to move it a year from now. You know,
I just remember that
Yeah, it had
might
been
have-
10 cents for years,
Yeah,
that we
it-
couldn't go more
It
than.
might have been a couple of years, but when I was treasurer, I think it went up 15 or maybe even hit 20.
And
it
we
passed,
have-
and I questioned it at the time.
Yep.
But I think that had been achieved by a waiver or something, yeah.
Because we hadn't increased for successive years
Okay.
leading up to, but.
There does become a point, though, where you have to increase. You're actually required to increase.
Absolutely.
So,
Any other discussion on the
Thank you.
motion? Not hearing any, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next, we have NHIAA tournament participation. I think it's just a simple request. I don't
It
know.
is, we, as we move forward, and I'm going to use air quotes because normal has taken on a whole new definition, but typically asking about tournament participation is just, it's part of sports and it's part of what we do. But because we have not fully opened and because the board had said, here's what we're allowing and it's been incremental, we're just coming and asking, okay, are we going to participate? We participated fall and winter. Could certainly have made the assumption that you were going to allow this as well, but we're bringing it back to you just for consistency's
So the
sake.
request to us is, I will read into the record, and those people watching at home, the NHIA will have an open tournament this spring, and we'd like to know from schools the following. Will your school be allowed to participate in an open tournament with no restrictions to travel? 2, are you able to host a playoff game? 3, if you are able to host, do you have restrictions on fans? The following sports are listed: Farmington spring sports, boys volleyball, basketball, and softball.
Baseball.
Oh, sorry, baseball. What did I say?
For this year, prior to June 30th.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, I believe the tournament would begin next week, so it's,
So based upon what this board has passed, would we have restrictions on fans? Do we have we don't have a mask requirement.
We
but-
did not release all restrictions for indoor. Outdoor was pretty much, we're not
But
going to try to
indoor,
do-
we have some restrictions
We did
for
lift.
occupancy?
I thought we lifted
You
the
lifted for,
occupancy.
you lifted for staff masks. You didn't list for outside people coming in.
I thought it was
For
fans.
occupancy, it was increased but limited for inside. It was unlimited for outside.
I'll have to go back and look. I remember we changed indoor too, because that was specifically what Joel said against the motion.
was it no mask except for what NHIA requires it?
It was the number of fans that each outside player could bring.
Outside players, you had, outside being the sports that were outside, you opened that up.
Right.
But boys volleyball is still in the gymnasium. So
I thought it was indoor and outdoor. For
you had released for outdoor.
Okay.
I don't believe you had fully released for indoor.
So for me, I guess that's the only area of question. I would say yes, and if we have restrictions, what are those currently in force? And do we need to revisit that? Because,
Eric, are you on?
Yeah, I'm here.
So, Eric-
So for indoor sport, we're 4 per roster player for the away team. That was changed from 2 prior.
so we're 4 guests per player?
Yeah, for
And-
home and away.
And what are we requiring for COVID precautions?
Where it's same thing with the winter is our players don't need to wear them on the floor. Spectators, coaches, and refs do have to wear masks. However, the opposing team requires us to wear a mask, we will, which we have.
What's the date of the tournament, Eric?
So for volleyball, we are the 4th, softball, we're the 2nd, and then baseball, we're the 3rd of 2.
Well, I want to take this one bite of the apple at a time. I'm going to make a motion to allow the school to participate in the open tournament and host games
second.
with our current restrictions in place. So we have a second discussion on that. My intent is just to basically have a decision on allowing them to play in the open tournament, and if the board chooses to take up restrictions, that is a separate item, it can.
Does your motion include with no restrictions to travel?
Yes,
Okay.
which, as listed, yeah. I just didn't know
Yep.
what our current restrictions are, and
I'll second that.
I seconded by
Just-
Josh. So, any other discussion? Not hearing any, all in favor?
Aye.
So the motion is approved to join the tournament, and I guess at this point, if the board wants to have discussion on, do we want to keep the same restrictions we have for the tournament play that we're currently doing for the sports, or do we want to consider changing them?
I guess my question is, does NHIAA have any restrictions on fans by their protocols?
Or attendance by the protocols?
Right.
No, they haven't done any, they didn't mandate any spectator fans. They recommended for an away team, and to also, if the home team allows 4, then the away team allows 6, it has to be consistent. It can't be an odd, different number. But we are already set in place for that. And then the mask, they did require them at the beginning, but now it's just suggested and recommended.
We're not, just to reiterate, we're not requiring masks for outdoor games, are we?
Correct.
Okay.
So does that, so are we only discussing boys volleyball, which is the only indoor sport where masks potentially would be required? Because if
Right.
baseball and softball are outdoors, then it's a non-issue, in my mind.
I'll make a motion to lift the requirement for adults attending to wear masks indoors for the boys volleyball,
For adults or for all spectators?
all spectators.
I'll second for discussion.
Why don't we do what NHIAA does and say we recommend it and leave the choice to the individual person?
We put a sign on the door that says we recommend wearing masks, or how would that work?
Can I add a thought?
Go ahead.
My only suggestion, I'll be transparent with the other schools if, they've understood where we're in agreement, like if their school requires based on their policies that we have to wear them on the floor, we do in order to play. And then I'll also be transparent saying that our fans that will be there won't be wearing masks. If that's an issue, that may arise an issue for them to come play or us play them out. Just a thought.
So are you recommending that a mask requirement be determined by the athletic director?
No, but
Good answer, good answer.
no, but I'm just, and I don't know. That's just me foreseeing if there may be, because as I've dealt with ADs, there's some school districts that are very strict with stuff. But again, if that's our terms, that's our terms. And like I said, we'll do what it is. But we haven't had any issues so far. The only difference would be if the adults and the fan wear them or don't wear them. But I would be transparent with our team coming to our facility.
So the one question I have, Josh, on your motion, which is just spectators, but in our current policy, officials need to wear them,
Officials wear them, and students who are not on
not
the
on the court.
court are
So-
wearing them.
That
And coaches.
And coaches.
And coaches. So that's,
So I'd have to change my motion.
well, if that's,
Well,
your
yours-
motion
yours
only
is for all
encompasses what your motion is
All
for.
right.
Which would say spectators don't need to wear them, the coaches would still need to, players on the bench that were not playing would need to. But right now, NHIA is only recommending but not mandating.
But if I'm hearing Eric right, his concern is if we say spectators don't have to wear them, will Team B come and play in our facility?
Right.
So I'm wondering if, as a board, we can say they're not required, but we give the athletic director the authority that if that's the only way that game's going to happen, he can make them be required.
So,
But if this is a tournament and we say there's no restrictions and they choose not to come, don't they forfeit the game?
That's a question for Eric.
Eric?
They would likely, we might lose home, we might have to go there with
Yeah,
more.
what would probably happen is we
strict-
end up losing the home game and we would go to their facility.
Because then they can say, well, you're gonna follow the more restrictive requirement.
Eric, do you know what other districts are doing?
Yeah, I mean, most districts, I haven't heard any district that we're dealing with that we're going to currently that the spectators are not masked, so everyone is required to be masked indoors. Outdoors, it's all over the place, but indoors, it's been masked up for spectators and also athletes. There hasn't been a team we haven't been able to play without a mask.
Charlie, you have a question.
Go ahead, Mary.
I know, I used the wrong hand, sorry.
You can raise it higher.
Raise your foot.
Stop it. If I understand Josh's motion is that, and we're talking volleyball, that's an indoor sport. If I understand it, we lifted all, the motion is to lift all masking?
for spectators. that
For
was the way the
spectators, okay.
Motion was worded.
I guess my concern there is the students in Farmington School District are still required to be masked. So would they be masked all day long, and then they go to a volleyball game in the same building, and they don't have to be masked? I find that to be confusing.
And you've said lift restrictions for requirements for all spectators. So are you also, not to further complicate, lifting the numbers limitations or just the mask requirement?
Eric, has any away player or even home player tried to bring more fans than they were allotted?
No, so we keep to the 4 for indoor.
Okay.
Is that a sufficient number?
You know, it's worked. It doesn't. Everyone stays social distance. It hasn't been packed in there or anything by any means.
So how many games are we looking at for the boys volleyball if we were to make it through the whole tournament?
Oh, if we made it through the whole thing, we're looking at let's say 1, 2, 4 to 5.
Over what period of time?
About 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. 2 weeks, yeah.
I'll put out a comment that, this morning I spent a significant amount of time looking at Farmington's numbers, and there's a significant number of communities that are now between 1 and 4.
1 in 4 cases or 1 in 4%?
1 in 4 cases currently. Our vaccination numbers in the communities are good. I'm kind of leaning to saying, no mask required, but if somebody wants to wear a mask, just like we did with our staff, then absolutely. We're hitting that period, and we've kind of said, almost in a month from now, they're not going to be here anyway. But I don't want us to say they're not required and have that affect us losing a home game, and that's kind of what I want to, leave it to the athletic director, that if that becomes an issue, he can mediate it without having to go back to us.
Well, my one concern with the motion is it leaves out people, students, the coaches, and referees, because that's in our mandate. So that's one issue with the motion. I'm not opposed to make it voluntary, and I do understand that we may get into a situation where to play a team, we would have to follow potentially their more strict guidelines.
But to do that, we'll have to go there to do it. They won't change what we have to do here. They'll say, if that's your guideline, then you'll go to the more strict.
Or we say in those scenarios that the athletic director is authorized because of the incoming school district to increase the mandate for that game.
How do you get that word out? If we make a vote tonight and people watching it that are intending on going to that game, and then Eric has to make the choice between upping our restrictions
For that game.
and he has, for that game, and he finds out about it that day, are you going to have to turn people away if
We
they...
take 2 boxes of masks and put them at the entrance for everybody that doesn't have them.
You can do that. I'm just...
Do we provide them for fans if they need them?
We have in the past,
And we have enough to do that?
usually.
I'll amend my motion to include referees, coaches, and what was the other one?
Players. not-
Players.
not-
And then,
Well, that's required by NHIAA, that recommended anyway.
okay, that's
Okay.
recommended, not required.
They're not required by NHIAA inside, are they? Eric?
You just asked, are they required?
Yes, for coaches, players, and refs.
Yeah, they haven't required it, it's recommended.
Okay.
And then add the caveat, giving the athletic director discretion to change the requirement to meet agreements with outside districts, or if the NHIA shifts their guidelines or requirements as well. Does that make sense?
So your motion is to remove the mandatory requirement, replace it with a voluntary or recommended requirement, and allow the athletic director to make changes or increase the restrictions if required to be compliant with an incoming school district on a game-by-game basis.
Correct.
Home game.
In order to keep a game at home.
Right.
Basically, okay.
Yes, Ritalin, is that clear?
As much.
As mud, yes, that's exactly what I was thinking, but I think I can get it in by the time we get it typed up, the tournament will be over.
Yeah, that'll be good.
But no,
We have to type fast.
no, we'll get it.
So we have amended motion. I guess I seconded that, right?
Yes.
You did.
I'll re-second that motion. Discussion.
I think you've discussed it. Are you discussing the amendment?
Nope. Not hearing any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Just giving a little bit of pause.
The only other question outside of this memo is, for the tournaments, we're bringing in extra games, has Larry been consulted in the cleaning process, and do we have the staff to do that?
Larry?
She was asking, has Eric been consulted with the 100 games that are there?
Yeah, because we've got to clean after, Eric, and
Yep. Yeah, so yeah, we're aware, he's aware of the indoor volleyball game and the, actually the baseball home game too.
he said he is now, Eric.
Is that Larry?
Yes.
I told him this morning.
Was it before or after your coffee?
It was probably before.
Oh, it must have been before.
Okay, moving on to the next item. St. Peter's penny sale.
So, we've had requests, and I don't know that St. Peter's is going to do this. They have asked about their penny sale. They've done one in the past, early November. The Women's Club is also looking to do their craft fair. They both used Henry Wilson for the gym for that. Typically, that's just a facilities request and it goes through us, but because the campus hasn't been officially reopened, bringing that to the board. I don't know, I know the Women's Club has traditionally done that weekend before Thanksgiving. That's their date. St. Peter's, I think, has kind of gone back and forth. Well, it might not be enough time for us to get it together if we don't know until now, but we'll look at it. Because they spend an awful lot of time getting things together.
Has either one filed paperwork with the district, or is this kind of like, hey, where you guys at?
It's a request to see if it's even worth filing the paperwork. I mean, we have what they've done in years past. It's a pretty standard.
All right.
There's no difference.
And their time frame is starting of next school year.
It would be November for both
Okay,
of them.
so I guess my question would be, what are we going to do differently for cleaning protocols and staffing next year different than this year?
In large part, it's going to depend upon where we are. I mean, are we looking at having, additional cleaning protocols forever? Maybe.
Okay, so what have we, in the past for these organizations, have we provided all the cleaning? I assume we have.
We have.
Okay, is it reasonable to say in this case that we should look to be compensated for that additional cleaning? If we would allow them to host it, or is it something we're going to continue to pick up? I mean, what would be the difference in the expense to the district
Yeah.
for what we're doing now versus what we were doing then? Is it significantly different, and can we and should we put a dollar value on it? I guess is the question. So you guys probably don't have an answer, so I'm certainly willing and would like to see those community events continue, but I think we need to make an informed decision to say, this is the difference from what we used to do, what the difference we have to do now. This is the rough, whether it's time or staff time, which you can boil down to dollars.
Certainly.
And then this board can make an informed decision whether or not they feel comfortable absorbing that, or we're going to look to the applicant for some reimbursement, some zero, some or all, depending on what those numbers are. So I think, we would kind of have to put together some numbers for us to approve.
If we could ballpark that, is there any way to ballpark that right now?
It would have to be a ballpark. I mean, even.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it's not tomorrow, there's no reason we just can't table it. Larry can work on some numbers and say, this is this is the time that the difference, and this is the approximate cost, and then we can just take it up at a subsequent meeting.
I just throw another thought process out there, and I use the Women's Club, for example. If they're, say, meeting on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and we're going to be closed for an extended period of time, but we have janitors in the building, are we going to charge them for that when we could do it during normal hours?
Well, they would do it on the weekend before Thanksgiving, so it's.
And then that cost that Larry could work up could be what we're doing currently, and by then it could increase or decrease, and we could put them on notice to say, if it changes substantially from, like, say, if we're presented and it's $150 additional services, and the board says, oh, we're okay with that. But if it were to change significantly where we have an outbreak and we go back to higher levels of cleaning, then that should kind of come back to us and say, okay, because of what's happening now, this cost is now not $150 that we're absorbing or asking the applicant for, it's now $1,000.
Or if there's an outbreak, we may be closed anyway.
Right.
So.
Right, but, he has the information now, and ideally, hopefully, it'll get less, but it could stay the same, or it could increase. I think it would basically likely stay the same or decrease, but I think with some solid numbers that we could at least know what we're making a decision on, because the next applicant that's not on this list, we would already have the cost, because there may be other requests for facilities that will come, after we to meet on these? I mean,
Well-
typically, how many other facility uses do we have besides these two?
Well, and that's where, at the point that things are reopened, facilities requests don't come to the board. I mean,
Right.
I may get anywhere from 1 to 30 in a given week, depending upon what's being done. I mean, sometimes I'll get from a particular organization, here's the 45 dates we're looking for the year.
Yeah.
So those don't all come to the board. They have been because you closed campus and because these are now on a case-by-case basis. Once it's normal, your meetings will be exponentially longer if we go there, and frankly,
Right.
it's really more it's a building level piece than it is a
Right.
board piece.
Oh, and I think that information would also aid in the board decision to go back to, because if we're going to have all these requests that typically are not coming to the board, and we say, okay, this is the cost that this is incurring, the board may ask, okay, so when we're going to go to open door policy, what's going to be the increased cost for everything?
Right.
And we should also may have some board discussion on
course.
that.
Of course.
When the 500 came forward to us with their request, we had the discussion about additional cleaning. Did memory serve that they volunteered to clean themselves, or?
No, they paid us, they paid
paid.
us for
They paid us, okay.
How much did they pay?
So that set of numbers is,
money.
that set of numbers is out there. He may be able to,
We
rework.
may look at that, see if that's still current from what we're doing.
I believe it was 150 per weekend,
Okay,
that they only had certain dates for the weekends. If they request what they usually request, it's
A whole lot more than
every
that.
night through the week and every weekend, every Saturday
Yeah.
and Sunday.
okay. Yeah, so if that number can get revisited, maybe that's the number.
That's what I was thinking.
I mean, I would say personally that I would be fine with absorbing the cost if it was the same as that. I have no problem with that at this point.
But should we make that, well, you can do that in a couple of cases, but in another case, we've said, no, you need to reimburse us, and how are we going to go forward? I'd like to see a more consistent decision where, knowing what the cost is and what the total impact is when we're not involved is. Because it may be a substantial number and a staffing number that we can't fulfill.
Right.
And on the other side of that, if you go to we absorb it, we need to be consistent, and from that decision, from that vote forward, if 500 is still using the facility, they should not have to reimburse either, so.
Right.
Some things.
If we make a change. So, yeah, I would just like to get some information from staff, and we'll pick it up at the next meeting.
Could we also get the number of times that we generally have facilities use requests throughout the year?
Oh, good grief.
Well, this year's kind
Seriously?
of off, but
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that'll, if we're going to set,
You can just summarize.
It's near, something is going on in every building, every night of the week,
okay.
all year long,
plus weekends.
So what did,
including weekends.
so what did we do prior to COVID?
Christmas and Thanksgiving are pretty much off.
What did we do prior to COVID? We just didn't clean? Or we cleaned and absorbed?
We cleaned on the following Monday morning.
Okay.
early.
Yeah.
Is the time involved more complicated, that makes it difficult to do that, Larry?
In the winter months it is.
Okay.
Summer it's not too bad. Well, they're not there in summer, fall, but once they start coming in, especially in the winter on a Saturday and Sunday,
With slush
you
and,
just got the slush and the salt
Okay.
through the hallways and through the gym floor.
So I guess my other question is if we're going to charge, what's your expectation with the money? I mean, it basically goes into fund balance.
Goes into fund balance, and then would need to offset potentially over expenditure in the cleaning line,
You
or,
can't.
doesn't
You
happen.
can't spend that money.
It goes back to the
It goes
town.
back to the taxpayer. So it doesn't offset what's in our budget. And I'm okay if that's the decision the board makes. I just want to be clear that if if we're charging $150, that $150 is going to the taxpayer. It's not going into that janitor's pocket to offset those costs.
And some of those costs are being reimbursed through the CARES Act and other
They are
funds.
now.
Now.
They are now.
So I think we'll probably need some more information and recommendations
Okay.
at a subsequent meeting.
Yeah,
It's
and
not allowed with the timeline.
Yeah.
which part of your overtime line was increased because of the COVID money, correct?
Yep.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's another thought process that I'd like to see on paper. We've got a couple years of COVID money. Can we look at that COVID money as cleaning our facility and potentially funding it there so it's not at a cost to taxpayer and it's not at a cost to the organizations that do a ton for the community?
I would agree with that. I think that these buildings exist for the community, not just for school. I think that eventually, as we return to normal, that if we can encourage the use of the buildings for community use, I think that's only going to benefit the community as a whole.
And I'll put out there, I'm still waiting for any invitation to join the Women's Club.
It's true. I think we all are.
I'll make a motion to table items C and D, St. Peter's Penny Sale and Women's Club Craft Fair, until we get some additional information back.
Second.
Okay.
Is the craft fair also in the fall? I don't
It's-
They're both in November.
Typically.
remember. Okay.
They're both in November. One would be the first or second week, the weekend in November, and then the craft fair would be the next weekend or the weekend, maybe a week in between.
At the same time we have that discussion, you know, and again, we're kind of hoping to get back to whatever normal is June 30th. Can we potentially talk about, once we get those issues resolved, returning the facility use back to the superintendent?
Yeah, I don't have an issue.
No, I'm good with that. Is that a friendly amendment?
No, I'm just saying, when we have that discussion, then just, you know, that, once we set a fee, if any, then we can just say, hey, it's your ball.
No pun intended.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Table. Okay.
So the next thing on our agenda is policy BCB, board member conflict of interest. Now, the only proposed revision was at the end.
Yes.
This policy being, last it was amended was October 20th, 2014.
This is a policy that is in place. The question that came up was the conflict of interest that could potentially arise if a board member were placed in a subordinate position to me. And so initially it was proposed that this would be a whole new policy, and as I went through and tried to figure out how to throw it into the alphabet soup and where it would fit, and I went, oh, we already have one, add it here. And I know that there's been some discussion as to whether or not this is exactly the way you wanted that worded, or if you wanted to tweak that a bit, but it's here for discussion purposes and wordsmith away.
Okay, on that topic, Tim.
So, on the proposed changes, I agree with it. I think it's needed. But I think we have to take it a next step further, and I'll give you an example. I'm a parent on this board, and sometimes I wear the hat of a parent and the hat of the board. But if I were to volunteer at this tournament, taking gate receipts or whatever, as a volunteer, I'm subordinate to the superintendent. But I think as a board member, I can say, hey, I want to do some politic and I want to volunteer at the basketball game, and I become answerable to the board versus the superintendent. And I think we have to police ourselves, per se, than to put us in a position, but I think there needs to be a mechanism for that.
That if I have an issue with his conduct, I would come to you and say, deal with him.
Right.
Not that I would expect that to happen, but
I would.
It could. It could.
So were you proposing to,
So as it's worded now,
Yeah.
any exceptions to this would have to come to the board on a case-by-case basis.
Well, right now, there's not even an exception that's allowed by this policy. So I think that's where.
That's where my
Tim's trying
concern
to make
is.
sure that there's enough room for you to volunteer, because that's also needed and necessary. I mean, Mr. Shagnon does a lot of volunteer
Right.
work, but there needs to be that mechanism, so if someone steps out of line, where does that go and how is that dealt with?
So I would propose a change after superintendent, change the period to a comma, and add the verbiage unless approved by a majority of the board.
So every volunteer opportunity needs to come to the board first?
If it's a member of the board.
I don't think you're going to see a lot of the volunteer opportunities. I mean, you know, myself, who's, again, the only parent on the board, I'll probably volunteer for movie nights, and they've got dates and times, and I'll put one thing in front of the board saying, hey, I'd like to be here as a volunteer, just want to make sure nobody has any issues with it. And then if I show up under the influence of alcohol, it's not Ruth Ellen that's chastising me, who I evaluated. She goes to the board and says, hey, well, you know, you had a board member that was at a function, appeared to be impaired, and then the board handles that through a censure, if that makes sense.
I may call you and suggest that he goes home before things go too
Yeah,
far
I did.
south,
Or
but
that you drive him home.
yes.
come and get him, please?
Yeah, Uber.
Or you could call the resource officer.
Yeah, I don't have any opposition to that. I think
And I'm
we
not,
can start that way. If it becomes, we have so many volunteer scenarios that it becomes burdensome, we can revise it.
All right. I was just thinking that, you know, we have new business on every agenda. If 3 different people want to pop in and say, anybody have a problem if I volunteer for movie night? Anybody have a problem? You know, you're talking a minute, maybe 2. And that way we're also aware, A, that the opportunity exists, and B, that we're aware that a board member is acting, not really per se on our behalf at these functions, but that they're there and they sort of do have a dual purpose at times.
So what I have for wording is after superintendent, comma, unless the volunteer scenario is specifically approved by the board.
Correct.
can we, before we vote on the change, can I just bring something up?
And else in the policy,
Yeah, in this policy.
I have some other discussion.
Okay.
So
Is-
I'll go first. Maybe it'll encompass yours.
Well, I was thinking of you, but go ahead.
Go ahead. So the second paragraph
That's where I was.
starts out with a board member who has a personal private interest. I think it needs to include the language, is a board member who has a
Pecuniary.
current or past, because it doesn't differentiate, interest, and it says a matter, but I think it also should say, or the parties before the board, or however you want to put it, because it could be, you know, I had contracted with Norway Plains for a site plan review, and
Well,
typically...
that would be a matter.
Right. And that could have been, that would either be a past matter that's been resolved, or it's currently being done.
Right, but that would still fall under matter.
Right.
I think if you
Okay,
put current or
yeah,
past,
so-
I think matter still gives you a whole lot of latitude there,
Right.
whether it's a personnel appointment or it's
Right.
a vendor relationship.
So there ends up being two levels of potential perceived conflicts or actual conflicts. I'll use my planning board experience where typically if you may have had business dealings with a professional firm that's come to the board, typically by policy, and that needs to be disclosed to the board members. Say, you know, I basically had a contract with this Norway Plains for some surveying, and that's since concluded. I have currently nothing going on with them now, and you know, versus two separate levels there, not only, because this just states has, but has means current, not past. And then it talks about that they should, so that interest should be disclosed to the board, past and present. And it's, the next part of that sentence says, will not deliberate on a matter. I think that that is an area that, because the recusal is a voluntary decision of the board member, but should follow, but the policy. But, because somebody may say, well, I've had matters in the past that have since concluded, does the board have any issues with me sitting on this? And the board may say, we think you should recuse yourself, or we don't have any concerns. The board member could say, okay, I'm going to recuse myself because I've got something current, but if there's nothing current, they may choose to recuse themselves, or they may say, I want to be available to discuss and may not deliberate. So to hear, and what it says here is they will not deliberate on the matter. So it's kind of,
So can I ask a clarifying question,
Go ahead.
Charlie? So in that scenario, if someone says, okay, I have this relationship with a vendor or whatever,
Or you have or had.
I have or had. Does the board have any problems with it because I'd like to be part of this discussion?
Right.
And if the board says, yes, we have a problem with it, and somebody says, well, but I still want to.
well,
Where is-
if we can say by the policy that person has to recuse themselves, but I don't know if you can do that.
You can't.
You can't. And so that's where,
So-
I guess, so
And I'm not opposed
saying it
to,
by, are you okay with that, does it really matter if they're okay with that?
So,
well, I put it up because,
Yeah. No.
because if the board member said, we think you should recuse yourself, I would get it from the table.
You would.
Just 90% of board members would,
But I'm just-
95%.
So just kind of putting it, but if you write policy for the 5%.
Right.
So I guess my question is, do you put that in there if you have no way of actually making that?
No, I'm not saying that has to be in there, as
Okay.
far as asking and polling the board. But I think there's scenarios where, because it's a small world, that people have had business dealings with people that,
Well, of course,
right?
yeah.
So, but it's important to know to what extent, or has there been some business dealings beforehand,
Well, in a small
past
town.
and present,
Yeah.
so that the board can at least ascertain as, how they should take that person's input.
Right,
in the
because in a
discussion.
small town too, sometimes you can't swing a cat without hitting a present, so, I mean,
And the thing is, those people that have had business dealings with somebody in the past also may have some just information they want to add to discussion for other members to hear. In some cases, for me, I could say, I'm not going to recuse myself, but I'm going to abstain from voting, and I'll provide any answer, assist to answer any questions I know from my experience in this matter. And then the board can, and not deliberate, but basically supply information, if the board wants it. Tim? I mean, I don't have it wordsmithed out, but I think it needs to talk about the past and present.
I've got current or past,
Yeah.
I've got that in there.
Tim?
so a literal meaning from this means I can't approve any manifest or take any board action with Eversource and Atlantic Broadband because I do business with both. So I'd rather see this that say something very generic that said if a board member has a pecuniary interest in a matter that comes before the board, they should alert the board and consider and recuse themselves. And just leave it at that. I mean, and I get what Charlie's saying, and maybe it's more applicable to the planning board on Norway Plains. He knows them, but he's not making money off of what's before the board. And if he is, and it's an under-the-table deal, he's subject to the penalties of law. So I just like to keep it simple because the Supreme Court says on legislative issues, which is awarding of bids and whatever, we can be biased because of that small community and connection. On a judicial matter, then in order to be removed, you have to have actual bias. So there's a big jump between the two functions that we serve as board members, and I think it's to vote on something you're going to have a pecuniary interest in is horrible. And
Yeah, well, I think that is, for anything you have a financial interest, you need to recuse yourself, period. But I think it's important for board members to disclose to the other board members, general public, that if you've had dealings with this organization in the past, which is not the usual and customary Eversource, Atlantic Broadband, those type of scenarios.
So 15 years ago, I did business with Norway Plains. Do I have to disclose that if they're looking to survey the school? I mean, how far back does it go?
Right, and how many surveyors are there in the area?
Well, I mean, you could say, put it in there, that members feels pertinent to disclose. Because right now, a board member is
So what if I don't?
before the board will disclose the interest to the board.
So what if I don't? What's the remedy?
There is none. Censure,
Exactly.
right? You can't remove someone from the board, so.
Right.
But right now, it says a board member who has a personal or private interest in a matter proposed or pending before the board will disclose such interest to the board.
But you can't legislate through policy my statutory duties.
You can say it, you can say you have to do this, but nobody's under any obligation to follow it.
But once you're receiving a benefit for that vote, then it becomes criminal.
Right.
And there's a different route, and that's kind of where I think that language needs to go. So if,
But the criminal is already there, whether the language exists or not.
I agree.
So does it need to, other than saying the past or present, do we need to add that additional? Or the weight of law exists whether it's printed here or not? And ignorance of the law is not an excuse.
I mean, I almost want to take the entire second paragraph out.
I honestly, the latter half of the second paragraph it talks about embarrassing the board or personally embarrassing another board member. How far do you go in regulating the behavior outside this board meeting?
I do that every meeting.
I mean,
Mary, you had something to say?
No, I'm good.
I won't embarrass you.
No. I honestly, no, but that's a good point. I'm wondering if the first part of the policy were to read personal or private, past, present, or...
I have a board member who has a current or past personal or private interest.
Perfect.
Any matter.
Has an obligation to disclose such interest to the board.
Under what?
honor system.
Our expected
Fair
ethics.
practice?
But, I mean, under what RSA?
There isn't one.
Then how can
Then we
we
can't put it in the
legislate it in a policy?
So what you're saying then is basically the entire second paragraph.
When you say ethically, the expectation is, but you can't, and if you don't meet expectations, then bully for you.
I mean,
See, that's where the whole thing is, like, the second part of the sentence, will not deliberate on the matter, will not vote on the matter, will not attempt to influence other members of the board regarding the matter. So when you throw when you put the past and present in there, that whole second part of that first paragraph, because there's two commas in there, is, I think, an overreach, because we're saying that the person, because he had past or present, if you add those words, can't even participate in a discussion. And that really doesn't make any sense.
So do you want to say, a board member who has a current or past personal or private interest in a matter proposed or pending before the board
Should disclose,
should disclose such interest to the board,
right.
Should not.
period.
And if that member feels conflicted,
And they, out of courtesy.
then they
if
should
nothing else,
recuse themselves or abstain from the vote. Yeah.
Abstaining from the vote is a definite.
I mean, there are people who don't feel conflicted.
But don't we do that as a matter of our oath?
I'd say the second part of that, embarrassing one another would certainly be part of our oath. But no, technically, I agree with Tim in that when we run for this position, we take the position, we take our oath, one of our primary responsibilities is to maintain the highest level of competency and stature that we can. And if we can't force them, but one of my concerns was when you get into the deliberate on the matter, if, let's say we're talking about building a new driveway, and my company has done work for the district in the past, and I'm a board member. Does that mean that I can't sit here and say, you guys got to be very careful about the wetlands, because can I not share my experience? Deliberate.
Let me take it a step further. Okay, I've done business with Barron Brothers. Pretty sure you have.
Probably.
You did
Okay.
the role.
So all of a sudden, because she sits on the board, we can't, we're now pulling ourselves out of the equation. Now, does me buying material from Barron Brothers have any effect on a contract that I would look at between three equal competitors, maybe Severino and SUR? Could I make the decision in the best interest of the district? I think I could. I might piss Mary off, or I might piss Severino off, or I might piss SUR off, but here's three companies that I've done business with in my life. So I can't vote on something because I'm a small community. You know these people.
I think what it would come down to is if Barron Brothers is a competitive bidder, Mary should recuse herself.
But she knows enough to do that. She's got a financial interest in that
Right.
contract, and that's where the statute.
But that's what this whole paragraph says. When you read it, it says basically shall not participate, period.
Yeah.
Right.
Whether you use deliberate, influence, so you have people that have experience with either that area of say, whether it's in heating and ventilation, whether it's earthwork, whether it's construction. And then all of a sudden, because of that experience, they've come across these other people that maybe through past business dealings. This says you can't participate.
Right, and I would say
Yeah.
for her to be, part of a discussion where there's not a financial stake in it, no big deal. If there's a financial stake, even if it is her area of expertise,
Yeah.
for,
But what about in a situation like, and I know nothing about metal, but Charlie does. So we're doing specs on a job that he might actually bid on. And he says, no, you don't want to use that material because it only lasts you 3 years. You might want to consider using this material because you're going to get a 20-year shelf life out. Why shouldn't he be allowed to input that into that conversation? I just think
I would say we should eliminate the,
entire paragraph.
I'm okay with that. It was clearly written for a particular scenario, given the way it's written. Personally embarrass another board member, embarrass the board.
Well, its legal reference is 70s. You're
They
talking
wrote this
50.
because something happened.
Yeah.
policies are written because something
Right.
happens.
So what about if we make a motion to remand it to the policy committee or staff to rewrite it to what they feel it should be? And then we can look at a draft and try to hammer it out, because I don't think we're going to hammer out the language. Maybe we'll look at some other policies that other districts have adopted and say, this seems to be a better fit in this policy. Because when you read this, to me, it goes in a direction that really shouldn't go, but then it doesn't have disclosure of past events, which are pertinent to discussion, because if I say, for instance, I've done work with Barron Brothers over the years, and they're considering a bid to award them. But I've hired them over the years, but I'm currently not under my employ now. That would be good for the board to hear that I've worked with them for years, and I've always had
But
good
those-
success. But in this policy, you'd have to recuse yourself.
It would kick both of us
But the
out.
Supreme Court says you don't have to disclose that. You can be biased. So isn't
You
that
have
a
to
personal?
disclose it, but you don't have to.
You don't.
But if somebody were to read this policy and come back later saying, by this policy, you should recuse yourself.
So what? So what would be my answer?
But the policy should direct to the conduct that we want.
Right.
Not, now granted, it's voluntary, but reading this, a citizen could read it and says, I know that Charlie's done work with this firm, and by this policy, you should recuse yourself.
So I would say then we remove the portions that you have issue with in that case. My other question, if this is coming back to administration, and I'll leave that as a blanket to
Yeah.
wordsmith. My other question, to go back to the end piece that was the original addition here, are you looking to add anything in as far as censure if there is misconduct, and how is that brought to you? Are we looking for a procedure there, or just,
I would say we, just as a suggestion, we adopt the change at the bottom as we amended
As
it.
amended.
And the procedure can be on a case-by-case basis. And then we send the policy back to policy committee for further revision, and we can revisit.
I'll second that motion.
Discussion?
What?
I made that motion.
Go ahead.
okay.
Can we remove paragraph 2 and send it back to policy committee without any urgency at this point?
I don't know if it's going to read correctly if you do that. I think if it goes back to policy committee, they can come up with a draft they feel is going to fit.
I think you could keep the first sentence, change will to should, and end it at the second board. And that,
I don't think it's, and I'll shut up after this, but I don't think it's our job as a body to mandate what's not in state law as far as how a board member conducts himself.
Right, but what it says right at the top of the policy, it basically says recommended. So, and this is what we're putting forth, is a policy that we're putting out forth to new members and current members of this is our expectations of your conduct. And no, it's not binding.
I think that, any legislative body has an ethical guideline policy or...
But I think the first paragraph tells you what that ethical is, saying, the board declares that a conflict of interest is a personal pecuniary interest that is immediate, definite, and demonstrable, and which is or may be in conflict with the public interest. So it's saying if you get a pecuniary interest in a matter before the board, then you really ought to take some deep thought and disclose that. And you can disclose a conflict, I can disclose a conflict and potentially still vote on it, the way the law is right now.
Right.
So I agree, it's good purpose, or good function. If I start a snow plowing business and I'm going to put a bid in, hey, folks, this company's owned by my family or my wife or whatever, disclose it, but I can still vote on that.
I think the intent of my motion is to have the policy committee alter that as we discussed tonight. I think that it can be wordsmithed by the committee rather
Okay.
than tonight.
Any other discussion on the motion?
Aye.
I have
Not
a
hearing any?
question.
Okay, you do?
So just so that I'm clear, it's as amended, but there've been a lot of amendments that have been kicked
The
around.
only
So just
amendment is basically to be
Current
added
or-
is to the bottom.
Current or past, or is that out of it too?
For me, it's up to the
Okay.
policy committee. I'm just putting it as
All right, so we're
discussion.
just looking at the addition after the word superintendent at
Right.
the end of the last sentence.
Yeah, that's,
Okay, all right.
that's the binding
I just
part of
wanted
the
to make sure which part of amendment we were amending.
My discussion is just discussion, take with it what makes sense, if at any of it.
Okay.
Can you put that into the,
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
can you put it into the?
That's why I asked, Mary.
Because because the three of us worked very well through that portal
Okay.
that we use.
So yes,
Okay.
When you guys go through that, can you look at some of the, the official oppression and the ethics statutes, just kind of see if there's wording in there that we're really bound by and required to follow that fits that need?
And there's very few.
There's like 4 of them: improper influence, official oppression, those type of statutes.
That would be good to list in the policy, too.
A reference, too,
Yeah.
in what our expected conduct is, and it does define, to a certain extent, the ethics.
I think Josh has them memorized, so I'm going to ask him.
Okay, any other,
I will put a Word
New
version of
business.
this in the
Larry,
policy folder.
Thank you.
No? You just miss us, so you come in on Monday?
Consider your family.
Okay, Dad.
Then it's your turn to bring
The
the
only thing I do
it's your turn to mow the lawn, Larry, in my house.
I did 3 of them today. We did get back with Granite State, and they,
Do you want to come to a mic?
not really,
Okay.
Please do, so other people can hear what you're saying and not just something's going on in the background.
yes. We did get back with Granite State. Mike came in, and he says that they will work with the sergeant locks, try to use the same
Okay.
ones right now, so we went ahead and signed a
What
contract.
about a
with
time,
them.
what about a timetable?
He's gonna start with the ordering, but it'll be over the summer, especially because they're gonna have to rip the casings out and everything, so we wanna do it over the summer when school's out.
It's coming pretty quick.
Yes.
Good, good. Good, and what about the door lock?
Door locks, I have a meeting with Nate from Oak Security. He's bringing in a person Wednesday. We're going to do another walkthrough so that he can familiarize him, and that's going to be as soon as school gets out, and he's figuring it'll take maybe a week and a half to do them.
That person coming in is gonna be what, the install guy?
One of them, yes. Yes.
Anything else you got going on? That we,
No.
I'm trying to think, I thought there might have been one more.
Larry, hypothetically,
Yeah.
just in case something on the locks changed, hypothetically, if we had locks that weren't working, can we prioritize them on the initial install so we know at least
Yeah.
if they weren't working, they would be working, so that if we get an outbreak or one of our buildings blows up or whatever, it's kind of there.
Yeah.
Make sure that the building that blows up is not the one that we just got fixed.
I got a question. Any arrests in our burglary?
Yes.
Okay.
How many?
All of them.
4.
That's great.
Awesome.
Anything else for new business? Okay, at this point, I'll open it to public participation if we have any.
Did we want to do the learning management system?
That was more for information. wasn't it?
Well, for information, I didn't know if you were ready to do that tonight. If you need more time, then we can look at the 7th.
We've-
It didn't
we've-
go up until today, so that's,
I think we approved the money with the caveat that the administrative team, including yourself, kind of makes the decision. And if that's your recommendation, and it's going to put us a week or two into the negotiation process, I'm good with it. The only thing that, under that contract, I'll have to, bear with me, I'll have to go back for
sure.
a minute, but the only question in my mind is that the initial proposal, which I think was $50,000, didn't include certain things. One is licensing, et cetera.
So there's 2 pieces to that. The annual cost is the $9,080. That will be the ongoing maintenance each year. The initial startup would be the additional $6,700, but then with the build out of our content, that's the part that's the additional, that's the 50. That's also a one-time. So it's that 9,000 that becomes the recurring cost, the 50, 250, and then the 6,700. That's the initial startup on that. So one is just some of the initial data, and then the other part is the full build out of our learning maps and those pieces. The more expensive part is.
Well, you have two items in the folder.
Yes,
One is without build-out,
correct.
and this is a software package that we're going to use for,
This is curriculum, this is reporting, this is the management of our, not student information, but student learning data. It's that other piece of all that other assessment data, both internally developed assessments and assessments that would be STAR testing, state testing, SATs, all of that would be aggregated here and then be able to be manipulated and give us reporting that we can't do with what we have now.
so the first one is $9,080, which is an annual subscription,
That's the annual subscription.
so annual fees for that. Initial one-time cost is basically, as for setup and implementation, another overhead cost. It's one-time, remote training for 6 hours per training day.
And we can
So
purchase,
4 training days at 6 hours.
we can purchase additional days beyond that if we see the need.
6. So charging $200 an hour for training. And then you go to the next proposal.
This is to have them load our content. For us to do this right now without having a full-time data entry curriculum person and IT.
So what are we going to be putting in? The stuff that we're using today or the stuff we're going to be using in the future?
It will be pieces that we have started to move to that we are not fully using yet because we need it in the system. This is part of these are the learning progressions and learning maps that we are moving toward. So that we can say, it's not about chapter 4 of this book. It's about, here's what we need kids to know and be able to do. Here are the progressions of the steps that it takes to get there.
So if we pay these people another $50,250, but it's been discounted $99,750, deep discount.
Spring sale.
Where is this going to put us regarding cleaning up some of the deficiencies in our curriculum that was cited in our
It will
audit?
put us further down the road. Is it going to put us completely there? No, because having it in the system so then we can start using it, it's to start using it. It doesn't mean that it is once it's there, suddenly we've done a Vulcan mind meld and everybody is
Okay, so
completely up to speed.
when we contract with this and pay these people $50,000 to do that, currently we're here regarding being in our compliance to get accreditation, I was thinking certification, but accreditation, how much closer are we going to be? 10%, 20% from where we are, 30%?
As far as having learning maps completely in there, I'd say it's 50% of the process, but it's not, the next piece is then the implementation on the ground. And that's not going to be, and I will not tell you that it is, it's not going to be, well, it's here, so September 1, everything's perfect and
No,
then
I'm not
it
asking,
goes.
and I wasn't
Yeah.
suggesting that. So you're saying that this is going to go significantly, if you're saying going to get us 50% closer,
Because I have to have it there and usable for people to start implementing.
Well, the other benefit is, right now, our curriculum's all over the place.
And what
It's-
this
it's not in one
does, gives
place,
us
yeah.
the roadmap.
Or it's going to bring that from all over the place to one
central.
central
It's
resource.
1 place, and it's the roadmap that is available. 1 place, and it's the roadmap that is available. 1 place, and it's the roadmap that is available. 1 place, and it's the roadmap that is available. 1 place, and it's the roadmap that is available. 1 place, and it's the roadmap that is available. 1 place, and it's the roadmap that is available. 1 place, and it's the roadmap that is available. 1 place, and it's the roadmap that is available. 1 place, and it's the roadmap that is available. 1 place, and it's the roadmap that is available. 1 place, and it's the roadmap that is available. 1 place, and it's the roadmap that is available. 1 place, and it's the roadmap that is available. 1 place, and it's the roadmap that is available. 1 place, and it's the roadmap that is available. 1 place, and it's the roadmap that is available. 1 place, and it's the roadmap that is available. 1 place, and it's the roadmap that is available. 1 place, and it's the roadmap that is available. 1 place, and it's the ro it's not, and that's the
It's
thing.
not going to be the
that-
final roadmap, it's just what we have today.
It's always going to change.
As far as learning progressions and all that.
Learning progressions are always going to be in process of being tweaked. It's not an event, it's a process. But as far as here's where we are, and now here's how we're going to get there. We're not looking to say our curriculum is never a book. Our curriculum is never a series. It's what kids need to learn and be able to do. And then we have core content, resources that are the how we get there. There's 85 ways to teach this skill, but this is the skill that kids need to get to. This is the system that will house not only that skill, but what we're using to measure whether or not the kid hit it, so we can go back and say, what do we have? What do we still need? It also includes a fairly large test item bank, including performance tasks, including other pieces to draw from as a resource. Again, is it the whole shebang?
Right.
No.
So this one that you're recommending, which is Otis,
Yes.
what is their percentage of market share in this area, say in New Hampshire?
I know that Jaffrey is using it. I cannot give you a long list of other schools right now, but I'm happy to go back and see what I
They're
have there.
pretty popular around Chicago area. I don't know where they're based, but they have a good customer base out. And I actually went up.
They are Midwest.
I actually went up and looked at some of their recommendations and comments that were online.
So what were the other significant players here, and why were these chosen over those?
The two that were kind of I guess, the finalists, if you were, this and Empower. This one is a little bit more staff-friendly as far as being out of the gate, having them being able to use it without quite such a heavy lift. Empower is like everything on steroids.
So
It's-
how long have they been in business, and how long is this particular product, have they been selling it? Any idea?
You know what? It was mentioned, I went through 5 different presentations. I don't remember them all off the top of my head. I'm happy to go back and look, and all of the presentation material was sent to the full board,
Yeah.
so I don't remember it, Charlie.
Right. And I don't remember it off the head because I didn't really review it thoroughly when the first time it came around, and it came in late tonight. So, I mean, the board can make any decision they want, but I don't feel that I've got enough information to make a decision, but go ahead, carry on the conversation, Josh. I think you started, right?
I'm comfortable tabling till the 7th if you're not ready. I think this needs to be bought in by everybody. I don't think it's,
Yeah,
But
for me, you know, it may be the greatest system, but I've seen like this town get into a system that may not have enough customer base to stay alive. And then it's tough to be supported. So I don't know what's the history of this product.
well, and that's partly why the board has been given the information, and then you said, just bring us a recommendation. We'll
Right.
go with what you're asking.
Right, and
So-
this board could make a motion on that, and I'm okay with it. That's why you know, when you bring it up tonight, I'm like, I don't have my answers to myself, but.
I'll just comment in that there's learning law, and I'm okay to table it until next week. I don't think another week's going to break us, but,
2 weeks.
you know, we beat this to death in learning loss. We decided this is what we need to address some of the significant issues we're seeing with the,
Oh, I agree with that, learning
board.
management software.
came back to the board said, okay, that's, you know, kind of one of our priorities. And I don't know how far out the invitation went, but as part of learning loss, both Josh and I were approached by the superintendent saying, do you want to sit on this committee? And my answer was no, because I don't have the expertise in that software. So my mindset going next year is, and I did, I didn't spend a ton of time, but I probably spent 15, 20 minutes researching the company that she's recommended and looked at what they did to get insight into it. Next week, I'm going to be pretty much ready to say, hey, we asked you for a recommendation, you brought it to us, it makes sense, it's based on how easy it's going to be for the district to manage, and
But it won't be next week.
I'm ready.
2 weeks.
It'll be 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Well, then we'll make it in 2 weeks because it got in here late. But I'll be ready to go in 2 weeks with a decision.
I've heard mention of these proposals coming around before. I don't remember seeing them. It could have been somewhere, it happened very early
On
into.
board? She got on board? May have been.
It may be, I know that as we were reviewing the companies, that invitation went out to the full board to be on those, to either view
Yeah.
the in-person or to view the recorded afterwards.
Okay, so as far as I'm concerned, again, I'm not pretending whatsoever that I could say, oh yeah, this is a really great system, it's perfect. But this is the first time within the last half hour that I've seen it. And if it's not going to queer the deal for a couple of weeks, I personally would like a little more time to get into it and to read some of the do's and the don'ts, do a little bit more research. But if the board, majority of the board, because I do think a lot of this happened before I arrived, and I would defer to you folks if you're ready to drop the hammer on.
So, yeah, I'll make a motion to table to the 7th.
Second.
And discussion? If Ruth, Ellen, you could just pull all that through it from the
It's
past
already
up
in
in
there.
that folder.
It's already in there. It's already in the folder for the 7th.
You already got it there already?
I totally could have just missed it too, so.
Any other discussion? Not hearing any, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next meeting is June 7th,
Can I bring up,
unless we're going to do something on the interviews.
can I bring up a couple
ahead.
more issues for the next meeting? One thing that the superintendent mentioned at a past meeting is we don't have a 5-year plan for the district. Coming out of the woodlands fires that are now smoldering, I'd like to set our vision on a couple things, maybe starting in July. One is that we possibly talk about a 3-year plan on the district as a board. July, I'd also like to bring strategic design back on the table, because that's going to answer our vision of a graduate, and it's going to move our accreditation process forward. And then as a board, moving forward and into next year, and catching up with learning loss, et cetera, I think we need to set some board goals. For the last year, through no fault of the board, every meeting, we're putting out fires. And that's all we've had time for. So I'd like to start looking at some point in time where we start talking about our vision and our expectations and where we're headed. And I'd like to see that preliminary discussion maybe start the next meeting, and with some vision that, come our meetings in July, if we're going to continue every week in the summer, let's kind of move in that direction.
Does that become a workshop?
I mean, it could, but depending on what's on the table for July, it might very well fill in a couple holes that we need filled in a hole in a meeting if we're meeting weekly. If we're going to continue to meet weekly, do we need a workshop on top of our continuing to meet weekly?
Do you need to continue to meet weekly?
We'll let you know in 2 weeks.
I'm feeling a very heavy June 7th agenda already.
No, it'll be fine. No, I certainly think we need to keep some of these things, I agree with Tim, on the front burner. I mean, in my vision of this 3-year plan, it's going to have benchmarks in all 3 years.
Yeah.
Not, hey, in the end of 3 years, we'll see
Right.
where we're at.
Yep.
We need to have goals along the way that we can try to obtain and adjust as necessary to get to those goals. One thing being, whether it's this software, accreditation, all the things that we've been mentioning, so. Anything else for public session? Next meeting will be June 7th, getting back to discussion regarding the interviews that was taken earlier. Is everyone available for a meeting Thursday night, I guess, regarding that?
I'll do Thursday. Yeah.
I'll do my best.
6:30?
Yeah, it's
Or
gonna,
7? Or 6?
the later the better for me, but that just
Okay.
pushes the other
So
end.
6:30?
6:30 usually works for me, too.
Yeah, so we can set that up if you populate that list, and then we'll have a quick meeting to hammer out whatever's going to be the next step.
And this is basically for the vice principal, assistant principal at Valley View. That's what the meeting is. Okay, thanks.
Correct.
Can we, when you get a chance, and I know you don't have a ton of free time, can you go through the sensitive docs and see what we don't need in there and kind of clean it out, so it just makes it easier that as we're going in
Yeah.
preparing for a meeting, we see
some of that
stuff, because
stuff you just-
there's a couple issues in there that
Yeah, I agree with that.
I didn't pick up till the last minute
Yeah.
for tonight.
You just kind of clean that up.
Well, and yeah.
Can
and
it
for-
just be
For
archived?
tonight, I gave you here's the folder list.
Yes.
So what? I didn't hear that.
I said for tonight, I gave you kind of here's what's in the folder as well.
Right. But when you actually go to that folder, there's some stuff from last fall, there's some January.
No, I meant for tonight's folder.
Right.
Okay.
But when you
Yeah.
go to the sense
Yes,
doc
there's
folder, there-
It's cumulative, yes.
Right, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So
Can we
you'd like me to take out anything that is not current?
Can we just
Yes.
put an archive?
I was just going to say, you should be
Dump it
able to
all.
just archive it over.
Yeah,
And then
Easy
it's
enough.
always on our devices if we need to go back to it. You can electronically archive it.
Simple enough.
yeah.
Okay.
So it could be 2 folders.
Yeah,
Well,
right.
yes, or,
Yeah.
yep.
Current and unresolved, so to speak.
Yeah.
Ongoing,
Well, just-
and then,
I will organize it, and you can tell me what you think of my organization next time we meet.
That might be part of merit.
Okay, anything else for public? Not hearing any, I'll make a motion to go into non-public under RSA 91A:3, 2, A, B, and C nominations and resignations.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Want to wish everybody a good night.